Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Health Talk. I am your host, Dr. Niru Prassad, with my background in pediatrics, emergency medicine, and urgent care, affiliated with Henry Ford Health System, St. Joe, Oakland, and Beaumont. The theme of our health talk today is occupational health safety. Joining us as our guest speaker is Dr. Barbara Yakes, and she has a lot of experience working with the OC medicine, working with the emergency room and all those. And I'm very lucky to have her as my guest speaker because she's going to highlight our viewers what are the necessary things you do when if you work with the OC medicine plants and all those. So good morning, Barbara, and welcome to my show.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to have you. You know, we have a long association back in early 20s, working at some General Motors and all those, us together.
Yeah, your husband used to come.
I know.
And he would consult on some of the orthopedic
and
cases
then my
when I was at
husband,
GM.
orthopedic surgeon, Bala, and then he did it. So before we start, can you give your introduction to our viewers?
Oh, sure. My background, I didn't really plan on going into occupational medicine at first.
Right.
Because I had degrees in psychology and sociology, and then I went to Wayne's nursing school. And so I didn't really think about occupational medicine. And then when I decided I wanted to go further, I went to Michigan State. I was lucky enough to get accepted to their College of Osteopathic Medicine. So they didn't really talk about occupational health or medicine in nursing or at Michigan State, but there wasn't a selective that you could take. And so I worked at the Oldsmobile plant, which was up in East Lansing, right by the school.
Right.
So this was like, after you already finished your studies, so it was like a practicum that you could do.
Right, you wanted to practice.
And I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was like being an occupational therapist. So when I got into the plant, I would work with the physician there who was wonderful, and you get to see all these different types of injuries and illnesses, and you get to work with safety and ergonomics, and so it was really wonderful. And he advised me that if I wanted to go into it, because at that time I decided I would, to try to get the strongest, residency I could. So I was really fortunate that Harvard accepted me, and so I went to Boston, and I had degree in from the Harvard School of Public Health.
I was reading through your CV. It's so impressive.
Medicine, and then you had to do a fellowship year where you also have to do research, plan the project, and then you publish it. So, and there's practicum, because I worked at Mass General in the asbestos clinic, and there's a Chelsea clinic where you see people with a lot of complaints, and so that took a couple years. And living in Boston was different, very busy.
Exactly, yeah. Then you came back to Michigan.
I came back to Michigan.
Hired by the General
because
Motors,
I had been like this. What you would call like an intern at GM when I did that rotation.
Yeah.
So they hired me right out of Harvard to come back. But I was actually from Detroit. I was born in Detroit.
Oh, so you had. So going back to it, this. It's so much. So what is the OC medicine? What it does, like treatment of the injured who are. So can you elaborate our viewers about that?
So when I first started at General Motors, and I worked there 33 years until I retired, I was at 13 different sites. So manufacturing and non-manufacturing. And what you would do, because the master's program at Harvard and their fellowship, you do a lot of study and research.
Right.
And epidemiology, so you learn to identify causes of things.
Right.
And the people that come to see you in the plant, sometimes it's really important to have that background because you could be the first to identify a problem.
Exactly, yes.
And then you can notify safety and ergonomics, and then you go out and you look maybe for the causes of things and ways that you can mitigate or substitute products, toxic products.
So you did a lot.
Hand motions that they used, because there was carpal tunnel.
Right, yeah, most important thing.
But you do also, you suture, you have people with sprains and strains and burns and abrasions and a lot of different things. And sometimes emergencies like seizures, you take care of that. You do a lot.
So that's, what, Barbara, I had very important experience to share. I did not even know what is occupational medicine. Working at the emergency room, at St. Joe Henry Ford, I used to see all those people coming from your plant. And then I got a letter from one of their associate, Corky. I don't know if you remember her.
Oh, I remember Corky,
She said, Dr. Prassad, your credentials are approved to work in OC medicine. I said to myself, what is OC medicine? I don't know. But then I met Dr. Gracian. He was the person in charge.
He was the group medical director.
Group medical. And, my husband, being orthopedic surgeon, he was already there. That's how my path crossed with you. So just like you said, I learned a lot. Going to the plant, visiting them, visiting the sites, how they develop shoulder injury all those. So just like this, we learned a lot here. So now question of third, I'm going to ask you, what is the role of OC medicine physician?
Well, you're a leader, actually.
This is a very important question.
So I was over, as I said, 13 different manufacturing and non-manufacturing sites, and you go to a lot of different plant meetings, plant safety review board. They ask your opinion. You're always thinking about the health and safety of the worker and ways to be proactive, and you work really closely with safety, with ergonomics, with industrial hygiene, even EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, because sometimes people come with substance abuse problems. You work with management, and you do walkthroughs. You look for jobs. Sometimes you have to give restrictions because of the people that you see that are injured.
That is a very important thing I'm going to ask you. That
I never heard of a restriction before.
This is go ahead. Interesting.
I know.
Tell us the restriction.
Okay, they never talk about that at all in medical school.
No. What is restriction?
People would come. What's a restriction? It took a while for me to figure out, but sometimes people would have. A fracture or some type of an injury where maybe they couldn't lift their arm overhead, especially in the assembly plants, because they're putting in these big seats and bending and lifting and twisting.
They cannot do that,
Right. So the restriction would be like no overhead work or something like that. And sometimes you'd have to go look for a job for them because, the department would say, well, we don't have a job like that. We can't use them. Or you'd get, like, from the doctors in the community, they would send something like light duty, which doesn't mean a thing,
Nothing.
What's light duty?
No.
So you'd have to really finesse the restrictions sometimes in order to keep them working.
You cannot send them.
No, they don't like it if there's a lost work day.
So because working at the emergency room, I see suture laceration. I will give them off for 2-3 days on whatever. But next day, when I'm working at one of the OC medicine center plants, I cannot give them restriction for 2-3 days. They can find something in the plant that they can do. So they're
Yeah, heaven forbid it should be a lost workday, because of the OSHA.
OSHA, yeah,
OSHA log, and
Yeah.
the industry gets sort of rated on safety, and lost work days are a big thing,
Yeah.
So if you can keep people working with restrictions,
Right.
it works better.
They want to be
Plus,
lost.
the employees, a lot of them wanted to keep working if they could anyway.
Yeah, so
They
that's
didn't
what
really
I
want
tell
to be
them.
off.
Look, if you keep working, you will still be making some money.
Right. And for people that were off a long time, it's really hard to get them back to work sometimes too. So
Yeah.
it's better if you can find some type of a job,
Yes.
And we would go look for them. We would
You
do
will look for-
walkthroughs
Right. You will
with
walk
the
through
union too. Sometimes.
Of course, union is another thing,
Yes.
that you have to be careful of what union does to you.
Well, yeah, the committeemen would
Lot of
sometimes come to
politics,
medical,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, lot of
advocate for people that
yeah.
they thought needed them there.
Right. So just a little talk about, I know you have so much of knowledge, experience, medicine history. In brief,
Okay.
can
yeah.
you talk about
Yeah, it's
this?
interesting
Yeah.
because I didn't really learn about it at all in school, but it goes way, way back to like the 16th century,
Right.
where there was this physician who was in Europe in the mountain area
Yeah,
around Germany. Agricola was
Yeah,
his
I
name.
read the name, but I forgot, yes.
Yeah. So he talked about what he called diseases of consumption in the miners and the smelters of the silver and
Yeah.
ore,
But
where they
with
would
the
get
metal workers, right?
yeah, lung problems. And in his writings, he wrote about one widow who was married 7 times to miners because they died so young,
Oh, okay.
So it really was more in Europe. And then later in, I would say, let me look at my notes a minute, the 17th and 18th century, there was an Italian physician, Ramazzini. So he was considered the father of occupational medicine. And he was a professor at the University of Padua, and he wrote about it. And he actually had, let me just put my glasses on a minute here. He taught about diseases he observed in painters that had lead poisoning, cadmium poisoning, sculpturers, potters, glass blowers that would get
Yeah,
cataracts,
Cataracts and all
and
those,
miners. And he wrote that their afflictions came from using the toxic materials or inhaling the gases that they worked with.
So
And
we
so
are still following those. We are still following all those regimes
Yeah.
that he.
But he advised his students to always ask about the occupation.
Right.
So that's
What you do and the sequelae. Yeah.
And then in England in 18th century, there was a Percival Potts who saw many young boys who were chimney sweeps. You probably heard about,
Yeah.
or maybe, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
They would have ulcers on their scrotum because at that time in England, they used very young boys because they were little and thin to go up and clean all the soot out of these narrow chimneys, and they didn't wear clothes
Right.
because the clothes got in the way.
A lot of confusion in the
young
scrotal
boys.
area, young
Yeah.
boys.
And
right.
so he really studied and he wrote about it, and he
Scrotal.
determined the cause to be the prolonged exposure to soot.
Yeah, I
And some
saw
of them
that
went on to get
article. It's
cancer.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Scrotal hematoma, scrotal confusion at the job. So this is very
So
interesting.
what he did, he talked about what was the chimney sweep cancer. He actually was responsible for advocating for laws to prevent boys younger than 8 from becoming chimney sweeps, and that they had to give protective clothing. And that was important because I think it was the first concept of environmental carcinogens causing
right.
cancer, and it led to the first historical
And,
instances of government
Yeah.
mitigating cancer-causing conditions at work. They
Then
had
we
some type of
became
a
more-
chimney sweepers act.
We became more oriented, and then asbestos with the lung cancer and
Yeah.
all those came later.
Well, in
on.
America, yeah,
America, we
well, you
became
had
more-
Alice Hamilton.
Right.
So that was around the 20th century, and she in America, because you had all the laissez-faire attitude and a
Yeah.
whole bunch of immigrants and
Immigrants.
cheap workforce. There wasn't much on occupational health or medicine at all.
Right, yeah.
But she, Alice Hamilton, she devoted her life to what was called industrial medicine and was a professor at Harvard.
Yeah.
And she was really responsible for, like in the 1920s, there was this huge Radium Girls case where these women were dial painters of watches and clocks, and they would use this paint that had radium in it
Oh,
because it glowed in the dark.
right.
And after World War I, they the military really wanted things where you could see all the dials.
Right,
It got
right.
very popular, and the company was telling the women it was safe to do this. And they would, when I was at Harvard, like one of my instructors said, the women would even paint their arms and legs.
Just like tattooing.
Yeah, because they'd go to the
yeah.
speakeasies. During the Roaring '20s, they were flappers.
Flappers.
But eventually they started getting really sick. Their teeth would fall out. They
Must
would
be
get
eye injury
osteonecrosis of
also?
the jaw. Well, their jaw
Yeah.
sometimes fell
Jaw,
out. They got,
okay.
because the bone cancer, radium displaced calcium in the bone, and eventually cancer throughout all the bones in the body. So these 5 women finally sued the company, and there was a huge trial with notorious publicity, and Alice Hamilton, was instrumental in sort of getting the press to really talk about how terrible it was and how these employers knew the hazards of it and that they should take care of these women. And there were stories about how their bones would glow in the dark, and in their graves the bones would still give off radiation. So
that was a very
they did get
interesting
a
write-up.
settlement.
Very interesting write-up, yeah.
They got a settlement, and it was the first time in America that, let me see.
They got the settlement for doing all
Yeah.
this, and then...
It was the first time in the U.S. that an employer was found negligent and required to pay settlements to workers, and it helped establish the right of workers to sue corporations. And then it was a factor that eventually led to, the government having more health and safety departments, and eventually OSHA.
Okay.
And OSHA has a lot to do with occupational
OSHA
health
has
and
a lot
medicine.
to do, right? So you're interesting, such an interesting story, because after I read all this, how these women, how those things,
Well,
paint,
there's a movie about the Radium Girls, too.
radium
Yeah.
girls, radiation injury, lung cancer, this thing, all those things. So that is very, very interesting. And then just careers in occupational medicine are not just an industry. They can be medicine clinics. So can you highlight our viewers about that?
So, Occ medicine is one of the preventive medicine specialties. So you have occupational medicine, public health, and aerospace medicine.
Yeah.
So you can work not just in industry, you can work in clinics like Concentra. You can work for the government, local government, federal government, and OSHA, and in Lansing, they have Occupational Safety Administration where they do have with physicians there, and occupational health nurses too.
Of course, yes. They play a significant role also, the occupational health nurses.
They do.
Because they are the first responder, like working in the plant, if there is somebody has chest pain or nurses go. Of course, doctors, I always follow them. But most of the work are done by them.
Yeah, I had some really good nurses.
Yeah.
But there's also, like, the military uses occupational physicians, the fire department, police department, the prison system.
Yeah.
And, so it's not just industry. There's other,
Lot of
like
this,
aerospace,
yeah.
and you can do research also
Research
in academic
too.
and train residents.
Right,
And
yeah.
there's a lot of different areas
That you
as
can
you know.
keep
you know.
working.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is very interesting, because like I said, front runners are the nurses. The people who are in the plant, the HR manager, whoever is their guide, they also play a significant role. If they are on the track, they should be watching them, especially the safety part. You agree with me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like a lot of times the plant would have sort of like a health and safety fair.
Right.
And so, we would be there with safety, and we would do maybe blood pressure screening or give flu shots.
Yeah.
And they would be there with all the protective equipment, the
Yeah, right.
earplugs for high noise,
Yeah.
because we did a lot of high noise exams.
Yeah.
Respirator exams, and safety
So
would be there.
the protective gears that they are supposed to work start with the headgear first. There is the glasses.
Yeah, safety glasses are
Earplugs.
required in certain areas of the
Yeah.
plant. Earplugs in all areas where it's 85 dBs or more.
Yeah.
Sometimes ear muffs too.
Yeah.
Some people, they had to wear respirators in certain
Respirator,
areas.
if they go in that
Yeah,
particular.
metalworking fluids sometimes,
yeah.
depending on the OSHA standard for that area.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
when I first started, we would do asbestos exams, but eventually the workplace is so clean,
Yeah,
the
right.
medical surveillance requirement wasn't triggered
Yeah.
for that.
And also testing the drivers,
Oh, yeah.
who,
Yeah, I was a CDME.
Yeah.
I was certified for DOT.
yeah, DOT,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, we would do a lot of
Yeah.
the driving exams and
I took the DOT
high-low
test,
exams.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was fun, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
DOT. Oh my God!
I know.
I tell you, it wasn't easy for me.
I know, you
Here
had to be
I'm
certified.
going someplace, and then I'm reading my book.
I know.
DOT. That it wasn't an easy job.
No.
The DOT certification. But now, now that since I'm retired physician, I still keep myself updated, but I really don't need the DOT.
Yeah, it got to be real complicated sometimes because
Right,
these people
yeah.
would come in and there's a blood pressure requirement.
Yeah.
And their blood pressure would be too high. Well, no, it's fine at home, and it was fine at my doctor's office, and they want to argue with you,
Right.
but I couldn't certify them. And then
No,
if they couldn't be a driver,
no,
they might lose
no.
their job.
Yes. I'm still lucky to be working occasionally when the need, and blood pressure is a big issue.
It is.
Or even if it is a chest pain, they come with
yeah.
angina. I want to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
If I send them back to the plant, and if something happens, then who is going to be blamed but me, right? So it is much better, to just send them to the local ER or wherever, get a letter from them,
Well, we would try to refer them to their own doctor.
Right.
But there were times, people really had to go to the emergency room. It was
Right,
so
yeah.
high they could stroke, and they didn't want to go. I mean, you would just have to really talk to them and sometimes call their union
I
rep
know,
to
right,
get
union
them
rep,
to go,
yeah. Call for the ambulance or send them by the cab driver. So many things we have done, you and me. It's very interesting. So what would you give as a last minute question, advice to our listeners, to the people who are watching our show, and to all those occupational health employees who are out there, they will get the videos. What would you give last minute advice?
Well, I think that people should consider occupational medicine because it's really a very deserving area,
Right.
not well known. And you get to help thousands of employees stay safe and healthy at work, and you help the employer. And you get to know them because if you work there a long time, they come to you with all kinds of things. Lots of different things. I
Right,
mean,
right.
you don't just help them with the occupational medicine and health and safety. You can
Yeah.
help them with a lot of personal medical
Right.
problems.
So there are so many other issues we could not finish it. But I like to thank you sincerely for coming to my show today and
It was a
talk
pleasure.
about the occupational medicine was different from the internal medicine. I like to thank our viewers for watching me this show with Dr. Barbara Yakes, who is an medicine physician.
Retired.
Retired now, but with lot of
Yeah.
experiences in life.
33 years.
Yeah, and I like to thank our camera people for helping me prepare this wonderful video. So thank you again, and hopefully we will have a good spring and end of the winter,
Yeah.
and then we will meet again. Thank you again.